Hi, welcome to Excel for Educators, Episode 8. My name is Alicia Parker, and I'll be your host. In this video, I'll be introducing the concept of pivot tables and giving you some helpful hints on how to get started. I'll be doing this on a Windows 10 computer using Excel 2016. If you're on a different operating system or a slightly older version of Excel, much of this should look the same for you. So let's get started. Pivot tables are incredibly useful and have several different features. As a result, learning pivot tables takes time, practice, and inevitably making some mistakes. I'm going to do more than one video on pivot tables to keep these videos short, but also give you enough to move you to the next level of usage. The first thing you need to do a pivot table is a data set, of course. In this data set, I have a lot of data that looks like what you would use in a school or a school district setting. Each record is a different student, and there is information about the students, including test scores, courses, teachers, districts, etc. So given that there are a lot of teachers here, it might be interesting to see how the groups of students associated with each teacher did on this state test. We could do a multi-level sort by teacher name and then state test score, which I cover in Excel for Educators, Episode 2. But that would take a really long time, and the whole point of Excel is to keep us organized and efficient. So instead, let's just put our mouse in any cell here in the spreadsheet and go to the Insert menu. Choose Pivot Table, and a window pops up. Many times, it's okay to just click OK on the screen. But as you get better at pivot tables, you may want to select inserting this into an existing worksheet and choosing that location, or checking the box for Add this data to the data model. But for today, let's just click OK. Notice a new sheet pops up. In this sheet, you have a pivot table report area that is blank, and the section here on the right where you will choose your fields for the pivot table. In this example, we're interested in pivoting the test scores of the students by teacher name. There's a couple of ways you can do this, and as you learn pivot tables, you may need to experiment with these. I always try to envision what I want my end product to look like. I want a vertical list of teacher names, and then I want to know how many students scored in each state test score possibility. In this case, our state test scores range from 1 to 5. So I want a table with teachers going from top to bottom and scores 1 through 5 going across. And then I want filled in for each teacher in each column the number of students who earned that score. So let's start here in the pivot table fields. Notice these are all the column headings from my data set. I'll find teacher and drag that to rows. Notice that my pivot table has started to populate. Next, I want my state test score to be my column headings, so I'll find that in the field list and drag that to columns. You can see that the state test score numbers appear as column headings in the pivot table. The last thing this pivot table needs is to determine how many students for each teacher scored in one of the 5 state assessment scores. So we use the values box for that. This is one of the areas that it's easy to make a mistake if you're not paying attention. We want to count the number of scores per teacher, but watch what happens if I drag state test score into the values box. Did you notice that this label here turned to sum automatically? Excel pivot tables automatically sum numbers when you use a field that has numbers as your values. There's 2 ways to get around this. The first way is to use a field that isn't numerical. It's probably safe to assume that every record in this data has a student first and last name. We can even check that by doing a quick filter. And look at that, for student last name, no blanks. And student first name, also no blanks. Okay, so we know that we could actually count the number of student last names as our value. So let's try that. But before we make the change, let's take a quick look at this data. Do you see how there are 33 level 1 students for teacher Appleby and 165 level 5 students? Okay, keep that in mind. And let's remove state test scores from values. And we know that every record has a last name. Nobody's missing that. So if we drag that to values, Excel will count the number of last names in each of the test score possibilities for each teacher. Notice that Appleby has 33 level 1s, as we saw before, and 33 level 5s. So instead of adding up 33 5s, which by the way is 165, we have a count of scores. And the values box is showing us that with the word count rather than the word sum. I mentioned that there were two ways to avoid summing when you want a count. So let's talk about the second way. What if you didn't have student names in your data set and you had to use the state test score in the value box? So we removed the student last name, we put the state score back in there, and it automatically went to sum. So the second way to fix this is to click right here. Not a right click, just a left click, a regular click. This opens up some settings, then click on the value field settings. This opens up some settings we can change for the value field. Notice in this first tab that we have several things to choose from. If you look at the second item on the list, it's the word count. So choosing this and clicking OK will tell Excel to only count the number of numbers, not sum the number of numbers. And look at that. We do indeed have 35 level 5s for the teacher Appleby. And at this point, we have a really nice table organized by teacher, and it counts the students who scored in each state test score possibility. And we did that really quickly. But let's add another data element to this table. How about we also break down the list by grade level within each teacher's class? I can find the grade level of the students here. If I drag it down to my rows box, notice what happens. Now I can see the performance of my 9th graders in Appleby's class, as well as 10th, 11th, and 12th graders he has. In this view, I can see by teacher each grade level. But what if I wanted to see all the 9th graders listed by teacher? It's actually an easy switch in a pivot table. In this rows box, notice that I have teacher as my first data element to sort by, followed by grade level. I can drag grade level above teacher and notice what happens. Now I can see a list of all the 9th graders in order by their teacher names. 10th graders follows, and then 11th and 12th. If I don't like either of these views, I can consider moving my grade level to columns. Now I'm looking at level 1s by grade level, and each row is still my teacher. Again, like I did for the rows box, I can change the order of my pivot table. Let's put grade level above state test score. Now, as you can see, the pivot table is extremely flexible, and you can adjust your data view to your purpose. There is so much more to learn about pivot tables, but I want to stop here and keep this video short and manageable. Practice some pivot tables, and then tune in for episode 9, where I'll continue with pivot tables and give some more advanced tips and tricks. I hope this introduction to pivot tables has been helpful. Check out my additional Excel for Educator videos for more help on Excel. Until next time, this is Alicia Parker with Excel for Educators.